So I'm just going to basically, I ask both of you, and well, you take the question how you want, but how did you get started in music?
So I was 5 years old when I started taking piano lessons, and it just sort of happened serendipitously, I guess, because I was out to dinner with my parents and grandmother, and there was a pianist playing background music in this restaurant, and I was very shy when I was a little girl, and so I walked over and just was watching her for a long time, and finally my grandmother came over and asked the pianist if she gave piano lessons, and she said she did, even for, you know, little people, and so she became my piano teacher for the next 13 years. And she was responsible for giving me a classical background, but also exposing me to ragtime and jazz and stride piano. So thanks to her, I got interested in early jazz.
You still keep in touch with her?
I do, yeah.
And
Oh, I was just going to ask a question. I remember you as a very young girl, hi there, Ashu, performing. How early did you start performing professionally?
I would say, I mean, it's hard to define professionally. I was performing, you know, in high school in the productions there, and my band teacher would have me play a piece, and that was a big deal for me, but I don't know if you could say that's professional. I started going to the West Coast Ragtime Festival in 2006, and I was 18, 19 at the time.
Okay, that's when I remember. Yes, thank you.
so at home in Milan, my dad always played recordings of jazz music, classic jazz music. He still is an amateur bass player and banjo player and harmonica player. So that was the normal music that I was listening at home. And when I was 8 years old, because of a friend of mine at school that was playing the piano, I wanted to also to start playing the piano. And I started that I was 8, and started with the lady that taught music to my mom when she was in college. And she was very young when she taught my mom, and then she was a middle-aged lady, very kind teacher that after 1 year told my mom, you know, Paolo really wants to continue this more seriously. I recommend that he goes to the conservatory in Milan. And in those days, in 1990, when I was 10, the conservatory was accepting also people that were 10 years old. So I started when I was 10. I did 10 years at the conservatory, graduated in classical music, and when I was about 16 years old, I was able to play chords and play simple improvisations, and I joined a amateur Dixieland band in Milan, and it was a great experience. And then I joined other bands, but anyway, I started piano at age 8, I started the conservatory at age 10, about 16, some jazz music. And one thing I would like to say, because I think it's quite funny, my brother that is older than me used to play the clarinet and the saxophone at home with my dad playing the banjo, and we had these little books at home with like 100 popular American tunes like Smoke Gets in Your Eyes or whatever, and they were playing with the banjo and the clarinet, and I was there listening and I wanted to play, but I only studied classical music, so I had no chance to read the chords. And then I found a banjo book of my dad that had it was like a very redundant system that explained for each chord in each key which tones you have to play. Like a C major 6, you have C, E, G, A. And so I used that to learn from these books how to play the chords, and I could join the family band for this. And then from there I started trying to do some solo pieces on myself, with the left hand playing the chords and the right hand playing the melody, and a little improvisation, let's call it like that.
Wow. Yes, Fabian. Oh, here he comes. Wait, hold on a second. Here comes the man in the street.
So you never thought you were going to play professionally? You thought maybe you should have a career of some kind also, yes?
I never thought I would have played professionally, especially, I studied classical music at the conservatory, and when I was about 15 or 16, and I was already improvising a little bit, I remember another student at the conservatory that was playing classical music and also jazz. But my piano teacher was not happy at all about that, and in fact he was sort of, how do you say, not fired from the class, but it was asked to leave. So I kept this love for jazz as a secret thing until I graduated. I finished at the conservatory, and that was in year 2000, and I was already playing around with a fake name, so that and
What was it?
Well, yeah.
it was my name, Paolo, and a shorter version of the surname, skipping the first 4 letters. So it was Paolo Righi. That was my jazz name, and I was really scared that I would have disappointed my piano teacher, because for the ones of you that have studied classical music or that are familiar with our conservatory works, it's basically you belong to your teacher. It's like I don't know. It's a very direct connection with your teacher. Your teacher knows whatever you do in the music side. So if you have a little concert, you have to tell her. And I had this little concert with the amateur band in local cafes, and sometimes on the newspaper there was like 3 lines saying the name of the band, that at that time was the Milano Rhythm Kings. And maybe the names written in, and for me that was like I was already very agitated that she could buy the newspaper and read this and then call my mom and say, what's going on here? He's not supposed to do this. Well, anyway, she never knew until I graduated, and I told her that my dad is interested in jazz. I would like to also explore a little bit of this other music. And I had prepared for about 5 or 6 years for this sentence that I was and she said, you can't only entertain yourself, you have to understand the deep values of the human being. Like play Beethoven and play Brahms, and I said yes, of course. But yeah, I was just thinking that I want, just as a interest that you want to know about other things. And then I started performing, and since year 2000 when I graduated, and we are in touch, and she knows now that I travel, she knows Stephanie, and she came to 2 concerts in the last 19 years, where I selected the repertoire very carefully. I knew that Gershwin and Duke Ellington were okay. Some other things were not, but anyway, that's my story.
Oh my gosh, we have more questions. All right, Joe, let's get you right here.
I've always been curious as to how you work together to come up with those wonderful arrangements, and when you do you write them down?
All right, so, we have the chance to work a lot together, of course, and we love to practice and to find a way to play these great tunes in a way that makes sense both for the piano in 4 hands on one side, that is a special combination, and our skills. So the arrangements are made in a way that Stephanie can feel comfortable in playing in a way that shows her abilities, and I can play in a way that shows my abilities. So that's the starting point. Write them down is no, actually. We don't write them down. We write down the form of what we are going to play and some parts. Some parts are written down. But if we would give this to someone, it would not mean much. And yeah, we have as a future plan to write down some of our arrangements, because we have been asked from some people to publish something that they can learn, and so it just takes some time to do that. And in the meanwhile, we have new material that we want to work on. So it's a little hard to find the time to do everything.
I can't imagine why anybody would want to try to learn any of your arrangements. I don't think it's possible. It's crazy. Now, I do have a question. This is one of the questions. Why I'm not going to ask you. We get a lot of times. I'm sure you do too. You know, what's your favorite composer? Who's your favorite person to play? I'm not going to ask that. I'm going to ask this. When you're home, which probably isn't very often, you guys are traveling all the time, but when you have that rare moment to sit at a piano and just play, what's typically the first thing that comes out of your fingers? Whether it's a person or a style, or maybe even just a chord structure, or what's the first thing that kind of happens when you sit at a piano and you're completely relaxed and you're just playing?
I'm not relaxed at the piano. So that doesn't happen.
I doubt that.
No, there's not much time to just
Yeah.
sit and mess around at the piano. So, I'm thinking of, this is not a romantic answer, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of what I need to review, for the next concerts, and, what I can do on a certain instrument. Like, we have an upright piano in Milan, and so you can do certain things there. We have a grand piano in St. Louis, so I think, in St. Louis I can hear more harmonics, or be more fine-tuning certain parts of stuff that I'm working on, and sometimes we only have a keyboard to practice on. We all know that. Sure. So it just sort of depends what instrument, what we have to work on, and then we are deciding what to practice together. But you do sit down and kind of. He plays some great things without. Not songs, he just sits down and plays.
Just noodling.
He's noodling,
yeah.
and I hate him for that. How do you do that?
Well, no, I agree with the first part of what you said, that we try to use the time that we have, since we travel quite a lot, and in airports and other places you don't have the chance to practice, so we end up sometimes in the middle of the night to try to memorize things that we have to perform. We know that we have a tour where we have some new arrangements, and we don't like to play them with the music. So we have to, the music that we have written, the simple thing that we have written, but still there is something written down. And so we want to memorize those, and it takes some time. It's different to feel that you have it almost there, from there to feel comfortable to play the same piece. There is a gap, and that's where you need to be careful, because sometimes you underestimate certain simple things of the arrangement, and then when you are in concert with, maybe you are a little tired, or maybe you are a little nervous about
or you have lights that are kind of going all over the place while you're playing.
And so, you need to have, to be sure 120% before you, So, and of course, by practicing together, it's not that we sit down and just play freely. We have to decide what to do, and so we try to plan a little bit, talk and say what should we do, what needs to be practiced more, and yeah, I think it's not very romantic either, this answer of the question.
I'm not looking for romance. I'm just trying to get to the facts.
Can I ask just one quick question? Approximately